All right, AP Human Geography. All right, so we're looking at a screen that, well, we should have got to number 4 in class. And so I'm going to be picking it up here on section 7, the human environment interaction. And we are going to roll our way through, I don't know, about 4-ish or so slides. Just to make a little bit more progress on here. You're just going to make sure, and I don't know, it's just like we're in class. I'm going to talk to you about this stuff as we go through it, give you some examples of some of it, and just kind of increase your knowledge on Unit 1. Alrighty? So, what are we talking about when we mention this term, human environment interaction? It kind of, to an extent, is a little self-explanatory. There's a little definition for you there that talks about, basically this idea of us and the environment, our relationship, how it impacts us, how we impact it. A lot of times you'll see that when we're talking about the human environment interaction, there's kind of a more defined focus on things like sustainability, on like pollution, and environmental issues. So those are some little almost like subtopics of human environment interaction. All right. Cultural ecology, how humans, yeah, you got the definition. I don't need to read it to you. Think about, how humans have to adapt when they end up living in a really hot climate. How they might have to adapt. Think about us living in the Pacific Northwest. A couple weeks ago, I was up watching a Mariners game, and in the 8th inning, it started to sprinkle on us. Which we're in the Pacific Northwest. It rains, and lo and behold, the roof started to close up at T-Mobile Park because, well, we've made those kind of adaptations. Where we create a lot of our spaces to make sure that they have the ability to be covered, or they are covered, because we have a little bit wetter than usual climate up here. It all kind of gets into the concept of cultural ecology. All right. Environmental determinism, another one. It kind of there's a little bit of resemblance, kind of similarity between this one and the ecology. We think about the fact that, I don't know, I guess a couple examples I could throw at you here. We look at some island cultures that have developed, going back centuries, and very, very unique cultures, because as island people, they were isolated from other humans. And so they didn't have that chance to kind of, intermix and to have outside influences. And so they have these cultures that we can identify, sometimes even now, as being, like I said, very, very special, very, very unique. Okay. We can look at, in some parts of the world, they're maybe like closer to the equator, where, people just, it's almost like it's almost built into their culture where, they will shut down during the middle of the day. What here, what we think here in America is, the heart of the work day. In some of these cultures, they shut down because it is so hot, living in these tropic zones, that they shut it down for a few hours. They'll work a little bit later into the evening when the climate, when the temperatures are cooling down. But the idea of, whether it's some areas it's kind of a siesta, in other parts of the tropical world, it's understood that we're going to kind of take it down a few notches here during the heat, the peak of the heat of the day. That all gets kind of into this concept of environmental determinism, and how climate, how the very land you live on has that influence on the way that we are culturally, the way that our societies come about over time. Okay, possibilism, another wordy definition there for you that I'll let you you'll get down. And this, just think about possibilism. It's almost like possibilities. I was reading that in Dubai, in the United Emirates out in the Middle East, they are working on right now building what would be the longest indoor snow ski course in the world. They already have another one. This would be a second one that they've built in Dubai, where you can go inside and you can go snow skiing in the Middle East, in all this arid kind of desert-like land. I mean, that's kind of possibilism in action, where, our environment, yeah, we're not going to get any snow, but hey, we want to ski anyway. So, we use technology, and we use our knowledge and our ingenuity to overcome that sort of thing. It's kind of what is possible. All right. Landscape analysis is well, it's just that. It's kind of like measuring the impact that humans have on landscape. That'll get you a little bit more of a definition there as well. It's getting really narrowing it down when it comes to our ability to describe landscapes, and your little how there. Yeah, how do we do it? We get really close and personal with a landscape to really have a true understanding of it. Field observation is the idea that, you go to the physical site that you are studying, a piece of land, a landscape, a territory, and, you're taking pictures, you're taking notes, you're sketching maps, you're doing all this, you're collecting all this information, which, by the way, we call spatial data. That's what we get from field observation, is spatial data. And again, some of it's going to be photographs, some of it's going to be, kind of crude maps that are put together. Some it's just what we write about, what we see there. Okay. Another way of being able to do landscape analysis, and has become much more common nowadays, is through aerial photography, whether we're talking about airplanes, whether we're talking about drones now, and able to take these, a lot of times really, high definition photographs from up above, and to give us a better understanding of landforms and the landscape itself through those means. All right. Sound recordings, chemical analysis, actually taking those soil samples and analyzing them. All those are all parts of this process of getting a better understanding of, the landscape, and doing all of this, analysis, right? Everything that is collected, whether it's through field observation, aerial photography, number 3, what you've got there, all put together. And basically, it's kind of the idea of putting it all together. I mean, I'm using the word synthesized and integrated, but really that's a fancy way of saying putting it all together so that we have a better understanding of landscape that we're studying, having a better understanding of the land. And it gives us the ability to do things. I mean, I guess I could give you the example. I mean, look at where Seton sits right now. Look back at photographs of that same area from 50 years ago, from 75 years ago. How is that landscape? How is our kind of our urban landscape, where Seton sits and around where Seton sits? How has it changed over time? I'm guessing, we probably would be looking at some dramatic changes as we go and look at that before there was, any Costco or anything else around the area. Was it just farmland? Was it just, maybe it hadn't even been forested yet? Maybe, or, it hadn't. It was all just forest. We'd have to go back and we'd look at that. But I mean, it's through that observation and through that analysis that we can kind of see those kind of changes take place. Okay. All right, the built environment. The built environment. Here we go. And it's pretty straightforward business, okay? Buildings, roads, fences, any of those, I mean, if we don't use that fancy word, physical artifacts, I mean, you got the picture over there on the left side. I mean, a real old physical artifact that still we could consider to be kind of part of the built environment. But then we have the picture over on the right side showing, a more modern view of the built environment. And usually, I mean, even though I show that arrowhead, I'm probably getting a little too simplistic with that. And usually we do think of larger structures now, not necessarily buildings, because I mean, like I said, you can include roads and fences and things like that in there. But they're all human created. That is the idea. Very, very similar to that is the concept of cultural landscape. And that is looking at anything on this planet that has been made by humans, built by humans. The statue that you see over there on the right side that overlooks Rio in Brazil. I mean, hey, that's part of the cultural landscape. and the Great Wall of China, the picture over there on the other side, part of the cultural landscape. Whether it's new, whether it's old, if human hands were involved in its development, it's part of the cultural landscape. Okay, moving it along. Oh, and at this point this is where I kind of make this big shift in our notes. And really, this is kind of like, think about in our textbooks, we go from chapter 1 to chapter 2. That's this sort of thing. So that's why you got unit 1, part 2, and where we're shifting now into patterns and processes. And this is where we start getting into maps and all that sort of thing. Okay, your definition of patterns, your definition of processes, and or processes, if you want to get kind of all formal about it. And really, I mean, we think of these two words and their relationship to maps and mapping. When we look at maps and we look for patterns on maps, where we can sometimes see a process in action by carefully studying a map. That's where these two words kind of fit in here. Okay, and maps themselves, well, there you go. There's your definition. If you're going to get to a real formal definition of what a map is that fancy term diagrammatic, right? That representation there. Now, all maps use scale. If we had maps that were sized in real terms, well, it'd be a lot of paper, and it'd be really hard to kind of fold them up and put them away somewhere. So we have to use scale to make these usable for us. When we talk about cartographic scale, that is the idea that how we're going to take a huge expansive territory and we're going to reduce it down to a size we can reproduce on a piece of paper, on a paper map, or a map that we're going to look at, graphically on a screen, that sort of a thing. Okay, and so it's how we get that ratio between our smaller size and the real size is what we're talking about with cartographic scale. Some examples kind of allow you to wrap your brain around this. I've got some pictures over there, kind of gives you over there, but I know that's teeny tiny. So, a lot of times you'll see on a map where you're going to have a little legend down there in the corner, and it's going to say 1 inch equals 10 miles. That's cartographic scale, right? That's how we reduce the size of that land that we have represented on the map, that diagrammatic representation, so that we can fit it into a smaller space, sheet of paper, that kind of thing. Okay. Another way of representing that 1 inch equals 10 miles would be kind of that ratio 1, where you've got that colon 1 to 10. And sometimes you'll see maps that kind of represent it that way. Might list that kind of information in a legend as well. And then linear graphic scale. If you look at this map here, and you see these a lot, where they've got this little line on the bottom. And then it's going to give you a scale that is on the paper map, and then represent what that would mean in like miles or something in the real world, or in the real landscape. And so linear graphic scale, very, very commonly used in a lot of those kind of maps. And then geographic scale, also known as relative scale. And I think that we might have that on our second vocab list. But yeah, it's just that idea. It's like, okay, we've got a map. How much territory do we have represented on that map? Some of them, kind of like the maps we've been studying with and getting ready for our, when we were getting ready to take our quiz, we look at a global scale. That is the scale. We're looking at the whole world. You can have that local scale going on there. And with local scale, then we can start breaking it down maybe into, well, it could be from global down to a country. It could be from a country down to a state. It could be a state down to a county. It's breaking it down further and further, and localizing in doing so. Okay, scale of data, and that's kind of the when we look at population at a national level. And then we break it down further. What does the population look like? Maybe we're looking at population density. What does population density look like then in one individual state? And then within that state, what does population density look at like in one, either county or maybe in a city area, an urban area? As we go down from big to small, really that's where we're just looking at differences in the scale of data. All right. And then let's see here. I'm watching the clock. Yeah, let's see. Let's see if we can just make a run here to maybe a couple more slides. Okay. All right, so moving from there, reference maps, and I'm gonna go pretty quickly here because a lot of this does just get it's kind of review of vocabulary that we have, and it's pretty straightforward business. Like we talk about when we're looking at a political map, like we're looking at the map of India over here, and we have India, which is divided like the United States into states. And a political map does. It's all of the boundaries that have nothing usually to do, as much with natural landforms as it does with political boundaries that have been created by humans. So, boundaries between states, boundaries between countries, that sort of thing. And so political maps will usually give us the delineation between those. And those are typically when we see them. They're very colorful maps because, a lot of times we have each of those political entities represented by a different color. All right, so you got that sort of thing. Physical maps, yeah, those are the ones that like you see the map of Africa over there. It's a lot of browns, it's a lot of greens, and we got the blue water out there because you're right. It's showing all the natural landscape, and so you're getting the deserts, you're getting the mountains, you're getting the rivers, the lakes, the little seas, and then the ocean out there, and all that sort of thing. All that represented on a physical map. A road map, there you go. Back in the day, folks, way before GPS, when we were going on family vacations, actually we had these folded up maps that we kept in the car. I had kind of a Washington map, an Oregon map. Always just kept a United States map just in case. And you would spread these maps out all over the dashboard, and you'd figure your way out. It's very different nowadays in the era of GPS, but still GPS is making use of road maps. And helping us to decide what's the easiest, quickest way of getting from place to place as it analyzes traffic patterns on highway streets and all that sort of thing. But at the bottom, at the end of the day, it's still a road map, even though it's usually captured there in our phones and that sort of thing. A plat map, and that's how you pronounce it, plat. This is kind of a map that a lot of times we don't really see used on any kind of real day-to-day basis. And if you ever buy a home, you will be shown as part of the process of buying a home where your property sits, where your boundaries are in relation to your neighbors, and the street that you sit on, and all of that. And when you're shown that, you'll be being shown a plat map, and that is a map that really doesn't get too concerned about where the mountains are and where the rivers are. Doesn't really get too concerned about where one county ends and the other begins. All it is really showing is who owns the land around you. It really focuses, talks about their land ownership and the property lines. Where does one person's property end and another begins? Where's the property that belongs to a commercial interest, a business? Where does it end and the business and the property of another business begin? Those are plat maps, and they're very, very specialized maps, usually used, again, for everything from tax collection, as they kind of figure out how much land you own, and then they're going to tax you per square foot, that kind of a thing. And also used for determining, land values and all that. But a lot of it just kind of gets back to legal ownership, things like that. Okay, a locator map is the kind of maps that you're going to find in maybe in a textbook that's using a map as an example to give you a visualization of a place where it might be. Or it might be in a little brochure, like a little travel brochure. Something like that that's trying to give you a bit of an idea of where you're at. Sometimes if you're a tourist in a town, you're going to stop in a little, Chamber of Commerce room and building, and they're going to have all these little brochures you can pick up about all the little tourist attractions you can go to. And, they'll list little amenities and, what nearby restaurants and, what time the hours are at, maybe a little amusement park. And, usually they're also going to show that where it lies in relation to, the rest of a town or a city. It's going to show you some maps, and those are a very specialized, we call them locator maps. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I got time. Let's get one more, all right? And move us on into the realm of thematic maps. So now, we've talked about a whole bunch of different kinds of reference maps. Thematic maps, now we're going into a little more of a specialized area. And now you've got your definition there, okay? We're getting into spatial information. So these are going to get a little bit more complex. All right. The first one that I've got to share with you there is a Choropleth map. And so these are the maps that, yeah, a lot of times we're going to see, and with all kinds of colors. So distribution of spatial data. That data could be anything. Some of you probably somewhere in the last couple of years have seen some of these maps that kind of kind of split out, where are the red states, where are the blue states, where are the states that tend to vote, a little more Republican versus the states that vote a little bit more Democratic. Those that kind of split out the United States in that kind of a way are Choropleth maps. You could look at one that maybe that represents the United States in terms of from state to state. What religion is the most predominant? Is it Presbyterian? Is it Protestant? Is it Catholic? And maybe then using either a pattern or a color to show the difference between that. And, and then you end up with a map where you can kind of see how different religions are distributed across the United States. All those would be examples of Choropleth maps. Okay, and some of it will get into population data like that. Sometimes can get into, climate data and all kinds of different information that you can find on a Choropleth map. Dot distribution maps. When you guys did your quick little lesson the other day with Boston, you looked at a map that showed some density. Now they weren't using dots on that one; they were just using more little color variations, but they were still trying to get across the same idea, and so that you could kind of see how population was more highly concentrated in areas, and then how it was a little bit more spread out in others. You look at the map of Europe over there. And, you can see, when you look at everything from Italy on through to Germany, most of France, most of England. I mean, you've got dots that are so tightly, together there that it almost looks like it's just completely all maroon. And then you have other areas where the dots are far more spread out. The population is more sparse. So this gives us that ability to just at a very quick glance, whether we're talking about population, whether we're talking about, we could be talking about the population of people, we could be talking about the population of livestock, we could be talking about the distribution of farming territory. Again, lots of different data that you can be looking at, but using this dot distribution system to show where there's a lot of it and where there isn't as much of it as you look across an expanse of territory, right? The graduated symbol maps, these are always kind of fun. And like it talks about, it makes use of symbols. And a lot of them I'm showing you here on the left and the right are making use of dots. And the smaller the dot, then you know that whatever the data marker is we're looking at, there's less of it. And then as the dots get bigger, there's more of it, okay? And so you'll see some of those, whether it's showing the distribution of where coffee beans come from in different parts of the world, or the distribution of where coffee consumption comes from different parts of the world, that kind of a thing. And so where you see the small dots, that's where people don't drink a whole lot of coffee. But then the big dots, that's where, like you're getting up here closer to Seattle and us Northwesterners that apparently we're supposed to be heavy coffee drinkers. I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm not one of them. But I know some of you probably already have that habit at your tender young age. Anyhow, you see the distribution of McDonald's and the other one. God, look at the United States on that map. We're just one big gigantic red bubble. Oh, anyhow, that's what you're doing with these, okay? Different amounts of something. Graduated symbol maps. And then isoline maps or isoline maps. And these are ones that a lot of times I'm used to seeing mainly for topographic maps, like a hiking map. And it's going to show where elevation is beginning to rise. And, as you're looking at one of those maps, okay, there's going to be a climb here. And then another area you can see, okay, well now, it's actually, you're going to be dropping into a valley. And you could just have these little kind of contour lines on the map. And usually there's going to be some measurements along with it. So if it's plus, you're climbing. If it's negative, you're dropping. And so, that is one form of a map that is displaying those variations in the landscape, okay, as you are going up hills and then going down. The isoline map that you have over on the left side is showing weather. And so, you're seeing where the hot temperatures are, and see how they're using those curvy lines, and they're showing where where the temperatures are a little bit more moderate, showing up in the green, and then you've got those different variations of red showing where it's warm, where it's hot, where it's really hot, that kind of a thing. And so, all those examples of isoline maps. Okay. The next one we move into are cartograms, and I think that's a good place to stop. My goodness, we're coming up on 25 minutes. Anyhow, hopefully you got plenty of information you can fit along into your left column to go with all of these. If you have any questions about any of it all, hang on to it. And the next time we take some notes together in class, you can go ahead and you can ask away before we move any further with our notes. Okay? All right. We'll see you in class. Take care.